Today on Gritty, I'm joined by John Barklow.
You know, from a person who, you know, taught survival at a very high level for a lot of years.
And Chris Derrick.
That's my thing.
John is the big game product manager at Sitka Gear, and Chris is the whitetail product manager at Sitka. And this bull rider hunted whitetails up north where it's like...
It was -7.
And I am joined by Sloane Brown from Backbone Media, which is a public relations, social media, and content marketing agency for active lifestyle brands. And I'm joined by my good friend, Casey Harbertson, partner and owner of Mountain Ops. The group of us were invited to Sloane's family ranch in Texas to hunt whitetails. And although we talk whitetail hunting on an upcoming episode, this episode is more technical in nature. It's about survival.
We got dropped off on the south end of Kodiak Island. Mm-hmm. And our objective was to hike the highest feasible route. That's when I coined the phrase hike angry. Because the angrier you hike and you just channel your inner rage, like, the warmer you get. But because and the reason I was mad is because I did it to myself.
Right.
I did it to myself from laziness.
It's about managing moisture within your chosen clothing system. It's about hunter responsibility.
It's very flippant to say, well, I just start a fire.
Right.
And I would say build a fire in 6 inches of slush when you have about 5 minutes of dexterity in your fingers, and after that you're effed.
It's about staying gritty in hostile and sometimes deadly conditions.
I hear people say this, if I get uncomfortable, I'll just get down. But you might have missed that, you know. It's,
that's the whole point.
Well, what are you there
It's not
for?
very gritty to get down.
It's not very gritty to get down.
You know, you're there to kill.
It's anti-gritty.
That's right.
Yeah, we won't use the word.
By the end of this episode, you should have a better understanding of clothing, layering systems, and when and why they matter.
Because not only are you going to sweat and wet out your clothes, you're going to start to dehydrate yourself, right? And this could start this vicious spiral if you're in the backcountry of being dehydrated, never be able to catch up.
Especially if you're flirting
set yourself up for altitude sickness. I mean, a lot of different things,
and
right?
You're flirting, especially when you're flirting with like 29, 32 degrees.
Now you're going to start flirting with hypothermia. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you have to be an active participant in this. It's, you know, nobody's product is this, you know, wonder
magic
thing that you can put on, like this suit of armor, this Superman cape that you can just go, you know, and be invincible in. There is a responsibility, there is a learning curve, and hopefully, like podcasts like this, we can help people like lessen the angle of that learning curve.
Yeah, and hopefully, as a result of this episode, you'll be better prepared for surviving an extreme cold disaster.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You can't wipe your nose. You can't zip your jacket up at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a set amount of time where you have to go through this course of action.
Walk us through that. And after this podcast, if you'd like to learn more about a Navy SEAL rewarming drill, go to sitkagear.com and search rewarming drill.
That means he's recording.
Yeah. No, that's my April Fool's joke from product development.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
We take our standard flat brim, which we sell very well, and on top we put what I would call, of course I'm not in marketing, the Sitka reservoir tip. That all these beautiful hipsters in these mountain towns could stuff their douche donut up inside of, right?
Also known as the man bun.
Also known as the man bun, or the top knot.
Yep.
Back in the mountain men days, that's what Indians prize is a top knot. So, and they would stuff it up inside there, and then they wouldn't feel that undue pressure on the back of their head when they were.
It's like a safety thing.
It is a safe. If you think about it,
kind of like a reservoir.
We're actually doing it for their safety and well-being. Actually, Chris, the reservoir tip is for his pleasure.
I thought that was with the earmuffs and the ribs going back. Just saying.
I don't know why anybody's not. Because what do they do now? These guys with the Rastafarians and all this, they
wear beanies.
They put it in that really big, weird beanie that like bakes it like kombucha, and all they need is a reservoir tip.
I'm from Alabama. I've never seen that. So
Right off the back of the beanie I think the ball cap would be awesome. Like just slightly askew, like, full, like a Dairy Queen sundae, but just kind of tipped over to one side. It's like, which side do you dress on, left or right? I'm a left. I lean left.
You've thought about this in great depth.
Yes. I have, actually. This is my life.
Actually, there is a product brief that's been written about it.
I think it'd be fun.
Just like every other Derek out there.
What's your Instagram?
WDE Derek. Like War Damn
War
Eagle.
Damn Eagle.
War Damn
Wow.
Eagle.
That's
That
strong.
man, see, he didn't need any
War
any
Damn
explanation
Eagle.
in any way, shape, or form.
Where's that from? Like
Auburn,
what?
of course.
Oh, football.
Yeah,
Okay.
SEC
Okay.
He's from the South.
Yeah,
That's important back there.
it is. I've noticed that this week.
Yep.
How did Auburn do?
Y'all don't want to start down now. I'll poison a tree or something around here.
All right. Well, folks, we are welcome to the Gritty Bowman podcast. We are in Texas in the Panhandle. Right, Sloane?
Yep. Little town called Kellerville, Texas.
Kellerville, Texas.
Yeah, about 80 miles east of Amarillo.
Yep. And I am joined by John Barclow and Chris Derrick, both from Sitka. You guys work there, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah? Sometimes?
Yep.
And getting to know these guys. And Sloane from Bareback.
Or say it correctly.
You say it right.
From Brokeback.
He doesn't even remember what it is.
Backbone Media.
Backbone Media. And we got Casey Harbertson here, and from Mountain Ops, and David D. Austin, who's headsetless. He doesn't have a mic, so David's going to kind of help us with the cameras. And
If you watch the visual and understand sign language, that's how David will be giving his responses.
that's right. So tonight I wanted to just kind of talk about, we're on a whitetail hunt down here at Sloane's place. Thank you, Sloane, for the invite.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This place has
Awesome.
been off the hook. And I've gotten to know, I kind of knew everybody except for War Damn Eagle right here.
That's the way it goes.
And you were a bull rider? Let's talk about this. How do you feel about this, John?
I'm not really sure what to think. I've got a rule
Yeah.
that we probably shouldn't go into, but it essentially goes something like this. I don't really feel comfortable getting on the back of anything that's got larger genitalia than me. I'll just leave it at that, right? I think that's a good rule to live by.
You would actually be you're kind of large, so they wouldn't be able to move a whole lot. They might just come out and lay down.
I just don't feel comfortable.
Dude,
There's another 25 from John.
that video of you riding that bull is
Dude, that's
insane.
sick.
Yeah. Yeah, folks.
Like, I don't
Wait,
know
John, you were
what
talking
the
about
hell
jumping
were
on the
you
back of a
thinking
whitetail earlier today.
But
Sloane, it was
tip
only
him.
a 300 pound
Tip him,
whitetail.
it might work.
you're not exact. How much do you weigh?
220.
Yeah.
For real, like
Probably 165.
165. Is that how bull riders normally are? Are they normally like little?
Yeah.
No, I'm not calling you little, but light.
Yeah. Well, I'm the same size as you, but no. Sometimes. I mean, I guess Ross Coleman was like 6'1", so he's pretty big.
The guy that won the PBR World Championship this year, Jess Lockwood, probably weighs $125 soaking wet.
That guy is very small.
Yeah. I mean, is he 20 now? 19? Something like that. He was a
Really?
rookie last year, yeah, but he 120, maybe 130 pounds, and he killed it this year.
Yeah.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, killed it.
So what is a guy? How do you get into bull riding?
I'm not.
You just have to be from Georgia.
Yeah, that's usually the place where when you think about that, that's what you look to is the Georgia Alabama area.
Not places like Texas.
No,
Come
no.
on.
Just
Really?
kidding.
I was
Just kidding.
gonna say.
It's a joke.
Joke.
say,
Look,
that's where you get
he's
your start.
actually angry.
He was. He looked a little visibly
angry.
pissed off. By the way,
That's my thing.
by the way, we did officially poll folks on Instagram to find out if Sloane was a chick name or a guy name. And I think it was like 1% said it was a guy's name. It was
You know?
it was really, really skewed toward the chick. But it was a hot chick.
Always a hot chick.
Yeah.
Sloane from Entourage, Sloane from Ferris Bueller.
Yeah.
So at least I got that going for me, I guess.
But what the one guy say? It was a mix of two names?
Sylvester and Stallone, right?
Right.
So
Together makes
everything that is
Sloane.
man. Yeah.
So there you go. It's actually manly.
That's pretty. Yeah.
Making great movies.
Yeah. So Chris, tell us what you do at Sitka.
I do product development for the whitetail category. And
Okay.
I started about 6 months ago.
Okay.
And so a lot of what I'm doing here is, spending some time with some of the new products and some of the ideas that we've been testing, and that's usually what my day to day is. So it's everybody's dream job, actually. Most people are pissed that I know that count.
Are you ready to get into trade show season and start taking down ideas from people?
I am.
Yeah,
I really I like spending a lot of time hearing from people and what their thoughts are.
What's your background, Chris? Like, how did you end up with this gig?
I've worked in the outdoor space for probably the past 8 years. I worked with a fishing company that develops fishing products, so Abu Garcia and Penn, and worked on apparel brands, and I used to work for the Western apparel brand Cinch.
Okay.
Did your rodeo background help you out with that job?
That's I kind of like to go into jobs that I'm passionate about. Could never work on like toilet paper or anything like that. It would be awful. So I like
Toilet paper's a crappy job anyway.
It is. Yes,
So you did there.
More of those corny jokes. Thanks for that.
So
Thank you, Casey. He hasn't said 2 words this whole time, and then he jumps in with that one.
yeah.
It's kind of my role here.
So what has bull riding helped you with? Because John, I mean, from my perspective,
losing money.
bull riding seems like a foolish endeavor.
It doesn't seem like a smart one.
Did you see that bull looked like it was like
Dude, it's
2,000
insane.
pounds, and it almost stomped your nuts?
Dude, it's insane.
Have you seen what a Jack Russell did to this man's face?
That's true.
That is
It
true.
took my prettiness away on my right side.
Oh,
Yeah, but
dude.
he was 20 pounds. Imagine if he was 2,000 pounds.
Yeah. I just. So, did you ever break a bone?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it just happens.
What was the worst injury?
Getting stepped on in the face, I think, was probably pretty bad.
You get like your jaw lacerated, or what happened?
No. I had a point where one jumped out and stopped. I was hanging on the side. See, this is how good I was. So, and then he jumped again and strung me out of my arm, and I wound up under him looking up at his genitalia. And
Hence my rule.
yeah. And he stepped on flat on my face, and that one was pretty bad.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Did you have to have like reconstructive surgery? And
No, I put me out for a week.
He's got a hard face.
I was going to say, it does explain a few things now.
No,
that I
I
look
mean,
at
the
you.
stutter, you should understand.
So after this happened, how many more years did you ride bulls? Or was that it?
No.
No.
I was on the next weekend.
See, this I just found out about as we were turning the headsets on, and I'm having a hard time
Can we
changing gears.
Yeah, can we turn the subject to Sloane's sheep herding or something like that?
what? I don't even know where that came from. Where did that come from?
I think it was something to do with the top knot conversation.
I think so.
Yeah.
John, what do you do?
That's proprietary.
What do you do at Sitka, John?
Big game product manager.
You've been on the podcast.
Couple times.
Couple
3
times, yeah.
Yep. I'm still doing the same thing. Believe it or not, they haven't fired me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's pretty exciting getting ready to go into 2018 trade show season.
And we got to talking while we were here in camp. And one of the things that we discussed offline was layering and how to do that. And I was kind of telling you how Aaron and I layer far different from one another. And, you know, someone will ask and say, well, what's your setup for a mountain hunt someplace, right?
Yeah.
And I'll layer so different from Aaron. It's not like the answer is, if I give them what I use, it's clear it may not work if they're more like Aaron.
Right.
So you kind of had some comments on that. Touch on that for me.
Well, it's you know, because we build systems, that system is very adaptable, I'll say. Mm-hmm. And so every person, it's not like if there's 6 of us here that we would all wear the same system. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. Like, that's actually pretty standard, as long as you stick to some basic principles. Mm-hmm. But, you know, depending on the person's physiology and what they maybe ate that day and how active they are, what kind of hunting, you know, all those kind of things. If, you know, let's say Sloane, for instance, lived in Texas and he's going to go hunt in Canada where it's really cold, he's not acclimatized, like all those things factor in. So it's a great place to start by asking, hey, Brian, you know, what's your system? Mm-hmm. And hey, Aaron, what's your system? You should probably ask more than one person, but there's no set standard. There's just a few maybe key things you shouldn't do. So one of the things we say is, you know, if you buy a Sitka system, don't wear cotton. So don't wear cotton underwear, don't wear a cotton t-shirt, don't wear a cotton hoodie within the system, you know, because those things traditionally hold water, you're not going to dry, etc. So, you know, barring that aside, everybody really what it comes down to, and we were talking about this, is ask people, get some idea, but then you just got to go try it. You have to get some experience. You have to, you know, I'll speak for myself. You know, I've spent a lot of miserable nights outside going, that didn't work so well.
Right.
And then you learn and then you adapt and you try it again. And you're like, oh, that worked better. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, you know, over time, it's not just you know, we'd like to think that we could just say, hey, wear this and it'll work perfect. It'll work good. But to really adapt it to your style of hunting, you just have to go try it.
So I was telling you how I hunted Prince of Wales Island and I used the Thunderhead rain gear.
Yep.
And for those that are listening, it's Sitka's quiet rain gear, basically. And I use it on POW because I was walking through, either it was raining or everything was soaking wet. And so, I mean, it's like the humidity's through the roof like all day long, and you walk through bushes and they're waist deep or chest deep, and you're up against brush constantly. But I also needed it to be quiet because there'll be 2-3 hours where there's no rain at all, and everything kind of just is super quiet, and we're very close to, you know, we're spot and stock these black bears. So, you know, I'm putting on that rain gear, and it worked great when I was there. Really happy with it. Then I told you I went to after POW. Then I used the same rain gear in British Columbia on the moose hunt that I went on with Aaron, and the temperature there was right around. It was like 28 degrees, right, and snowing. And then it was 31 degrees and raining, and 32 degrees, and it was back and forth, like all day long. And so it was, and I felt like when I got back to camp, I felt like the rain gear had leaked. It felt wet and damp, you know. And so, you know, I'm asking you about that. How we talked about this. So you were explaining how the rain gear doesn't actually leak, but it brought up, when you explained it to me, it brought up some really good points about layering, how you wear the gear, what the conditions are outside, you know. So I'd like you to walk folks through that, because I think it was really, really beneficial to understand.
Yeah, so if you think of your body as this engine, which it is, right? And the engine's always at 98.6.
Right, and mine's like just fierce.
Right, absolutely. And what was it?
Is that
bronze and jacked, or tan,
Tan and jacked.
Tan and jacked.
This engine's tan and jacked to help compensate for the bald head.
Yes.
But you got this engine inside this clothing, and then depending on how much clothing you have and the environmental conditions outside, really depends on how this moisture, right, that you start to generate is going to move through these layers. And if it's 98.6 inside and it's 0 degrees outside, these things try to seek equilibrium, and so it's gonna move that moisture pretty quick, especially in a very dry climate. But the conditions you talked about, 28, 32, like right there at that freezing point.
So
if it's raining, it's 100% humidity. It's 100% humidity at that microclimate next to your skin. Like, there's very little equilibrium to be sought.
Yeah.
And so
if the outside temperature, what's the ideal for, heat to stay at the body, but also for heat when you're overheating for it to leave the body?
So anything less than 98.6, but then you also have to couple in whatever the relative humidity is outside.
Okay.
So when you start to talk about POW and kind of the North Country, where it's a lot more humid, it's harder for that moisture to move through, right? So if we went to interior Alaska, where it was cold and really dry and arid, then it's going to move through a lot quicker. But what you and I were talking about is, it really comes down to the hunter and the responsibility of them to, play a part in this and regulate their pace, regulate what they wear underneath the rain gear. So what you were experiencing was not necessarily the rain gear leaking, but moisture moving within the system, and getting to that barrier, but then not being able to push its way all the way through. So either you're moving too hard and overwhelming the system, or maybe you're wearing too much clothing. And this isn't any one particular laminate. These are laminates of all kinds, right?
Right.
And then what kind of compounds?
And when you say
that?
laminate, you're talking
Yeah, Gore-Tex, Toray, anything like that, any of those kind of
with
laminates.
an external layer or a hard shell kind of?
Yeah, we'll call it rain gear.
Okay.
What anybody would call rain gear. And then if you have a face on the outside of that rain gear that starts to saturate it all.
Which is needed for it to be quiet.
Correct, right? So I like to call that the cost of quiet. But when water starts to cover the outside, now it almost acts as a barrier, so the water inside starts to move through, hits the water outside, and then it reaches that point of stasis and doesn't want to go any farther. So it's, these are very specialized products, but people have to understand that there's limitations to everything. You could have worn a different set of our rain gear that would have performed really well and breathed better. But then what's the downside to that?
It was noisy.
It's noisier, right, for stalking those bears. So.
And in BC, Aaron wore the Stormfront, and I wore the Thunderhead.
Right.
And
so, again, totally different perspectives on that clothing choice.
And it's because, it's dead silent out there, just dead. No wind, no sound, no anything. The snow is down on the ground, but, it just, you could just hear. And so sneaking through the woods, it sounds like, when you're wearing the Stormfront in those conditions, it just sounds like there's a plastic bag coming at you.
Right.
And the Thunderhead was way quiet. But then about, 4 or 5 hours into the hunt, I'm pretty cold because I was telling you that the outer layer just felt cold.
Right.
And so explain that to me.
So if that soft face gets water on it, and then that starts to contact your skin, then you have that perception of dampness, and you don't get the breathability. So the garment doesn't leak, but you start to feel the moisture inside the garment next to your skin. And in a colder environment, the outside of that jacket, so to speak, is, let's just say 38 degrees,
Yeah.
you begin to feel that.
Yeah.
So
The next couple of days I wore a thicker, puffy layer underneath.
right, so you insulated yourself from the skin.
And then it was nice. And then
Yep.
it was quiet, and I was still warm. I was a little too warm, but it was better that than having it touch my skin and kind of get me cold. And you were talking about this, conductive heat loss versus convective heat loss. And explain that.
Well, convective heat loss would be if you were, say, sweating and there was a wind blowing across your skin. That can cool you in a hot environment, but it's also very quickly chill you. So sitting on a tree stand here, right, waiting for a whitetail to walk by, which hasn't happened to me yet.
Just be patient. It eventually happens.
And
Wait, who's tagged out? I think everyone except John and Chris.
The whitetail product manager
don't.
has not.
I have not
Sloane.
killed
Yeah.
anything either.
That's because Sloane
I
has
put you
been
guys
helping
first.
us.
That's
I
why.
am convinced there's an elk on this property somewhere.
I have had the most opportunity on spikes. I would like to say I'm going to hold on to that record, and I've passed on
You've
them.
let them live.
I've let them all live since they've been there for every single sit.
Yes. It's been good for me. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah.
It has been.
I know.
We know who's
We know. We know all about it.
yeah, taking care of the guide somehow.
So
But
back to the,
conductive heat loss.
it's kind of like wait before you go there. It's
Yeah.
when you say convective, I think of like sleeping in a hammock.
Yep.
And one of the reasons I don't like sleeping in a hammock in general. I mean, it's comfortable if it's summertime, but once the temperature gets just a little chilly,
It's ill-advised.
the wind is coming underneath you, and you're losing all that heat, right?
Right. So when you cook something in a convective oven,
Mm-hmm.
it circulates heat all the way around it, and that's why the turkey cooks quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the turkey in the hammock and it's cold air circulating around you, you're going to get colder a lot quicker.
Okay. And then conductive.
So
heat
conductive
loss.
is when you're, sitting on the ground glassing,
Mhm.
say, right on the bare ground, the moss, the rock, or in our case here in Texas,
rusty
you
old.
go and sit down on the rusty old tree stand grate,
Big
right?
Marvin.
That's metal, and that metal is going to immediately start to draw heat out of your body, right? Because you're 98.6. That seat is not, and so the heat's going to get sucked out of your body, right? And so you're going to start to feel yourself become cold. That's conductive heat loss. And so if people understand those things, when I went back to Big Melvin the second time,
which is the metal grate tree stand.
it's the rusty metal grate.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, all those things that were sticking up? I stomped them all down.
I'm
So
glad
if you go back-
I'm glad I got a tetanus shot prior to coming to Texas. But the second time I sat on Big Melvin, which sounds weird, but I did. I sat right on him, but I used a pad this time, a closed cell pad, and my bottom didn't get cold at all, and I was able to concentrate and kind of stay in the hunt. So.
Right.
You could just stand the whole time.
No,
Or
actually,
just not be so
in
soft.
that, I hunted that stand tonight, and you can't stand the trees. For your
Right.
shooting lanes. You have to sit on the metal grate, or you have no shooting lanes
Right.
because our guide didn't do a good job cutting shooting lanes.
I wouldn't call Sloane a guide. I'd call him more like a buddy with a nice piece of property.
Well, yeah, hence the guide.
So
You guys are hard to please.
hey, those heart and onion tacos were good,
Killer.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh!
Good job on those.
and the accommodations have been stellar.
Yeah, this place
It's
is
just
awesome.
the tree stands were doing like duct tape repairs pretty much at each drop off.
I think you need to let everybody know, because I've been getting a lot of messages about this. This is your family property,
Yep.
and you guys, it's friends and family only. So when this releases, like, don't be hitting Sloane up. to
Yeah,
come
yeah.
And because I'm already getting a bunch of that for you.
Oh, all right. Line it up.
So yeah, you want to sell
If
some
we can
tags,
call
just
it
let me
work
know.
somehow, that's how I'm trying to,
Yeah.
this for me, I guess this is work. So,
Right.
Yeah.
but no, it's awesome. I'm super lucky to have this place, and then to be able to share it with guys like you, it makes it awesome. You know,
For sure. It's been awesome. It really has.
On the conductive heat loss deal you were talking about, or convective. Okay. So that's like, you're standing out in the wind and it is cutting through what you've got. And we were talking about this, and as far as layering goes, and you brought up something that, I didn't think of on how you leverage the wind stopper and how you like to layer it. So kind of go through that with us again.
Yeah. So again, everybody wears it a little different, but for as many years as I've been wearing it, what I've found is, the closer you can wear a laminate to your skin, not that you would want to wear it directly on top of your skin, right? You always want a barrier, some kind of base layer, but the closer you wear it within the system, the better it will breathe. So if I bury the wind stopper right on top of my base layer, and then we start to stack other layers, again, if your body's 98.6 and the outside temperature is 40 degrees, if I put that layer closer to my skin, closer to that 98.6, there's going to be more energy or force to drive that moisture through that barrier than if it's just on the outside. Now, mind you, that doesn't work necessarily with rain gear. You always want rain gear on the outside. But what you can regulate is the number of layers you wear underneath the rain gear. So, for instance, today, just because I'm the big game product manager, I was wearing some of the big game product, but, I had a wind stopper vest, a mountain vest, right on top of my base layer. One, it blocks my wind, keeps my core warm, but I know if I start to walk into the stand, then I'm going to move the moisture through that layer. I'm not going to sweat very much. And then I had a new product coming out in 2018 called the Apex hoodie. And then I had a mountain jacket. So I actually doubled the layers of wind stopper. And then I went and put the insulative layer, the Kelvin Active jacket, on the outside of that. So that's a system that works for me. It keeps the system quiet when I'm trying to draw, real close like we were trying to do tonight on some of those animals. But it also keeps those wind stopper layers closer to my skin.
So they
helps
breathe
them
better.
move. It helps them breathe better.
Breathe
but it's
better.
not intuitive.
No.
People think of those as shells, which they can certainly be worn as shells, and they really work very well as shells. But for me personally, the way I've kind of learned how these things work, I try to layer them within the system, and I try to keep them as close to my skin as possible. We call it temperature gradient, but that helps the moisture move through easier.
Yeah, because I never really considered that. I mean, in general, I'm usually wearing, my base layers. Then I'll wear like some kind of insulating layer under next, like a puffy of some kind or Kelvin Active. And then over that, I'll put sometimes a Jetstream or a windproof jacket.
Yeah.
May not be waterproof because, the Jetstream's quiet.
Right.
It's just a soft shell, but it's got the wind stopper in it. And, I've worn that a lot, but I've never thought about wearing, like a wind stopper vest, Jetstream underneath, and then my puffy over that.
Yeah, so you have to make these decisions. When you wake up in the morning, like what I'm doing in my head is I'm calculating. What do I think the conditions are going to be? What kind of activity I'm going to do? So if I have to climb 2,000 feet to the top of a ridge, I know it's going to be cold when I start because it'll be 3 a.m. By the time I get there, the sun's coming up. I'm not really expecting much precipitation, but it's going to be a little breezy. I know when I get up there and I'm going to start glassing for a mule deer or whatever. I'm going to put the mountain jacket or the mountain vest on first, and I'm going to put the Kelvin Active jacket on top of that. So my thought process is I'm going to start the hike, and by the time I get up there and the sun's coming up, the temperature's going to increase. I've generated a bunch of heat. And as opposed to taking the mountain jacket off and the Kelvin jacket off to put the mountain jacket back on, I just strip the Kelvin jacket off the top. I've got the wind protection I need. I can continue to hunt as the day goes on and the temperatures increase. So I almost try to think backwards as what do I put on as to what do I take off, and that's a system that's worked really well for me.
Yeah.
Tonight I had, so for instance, if I'm trying to stalk in on an animal and I want camouflage, I want something that's really quiet. So I used that a lot this year as well. I had a mountain vest on over top of my base layer. And then I put this new Apex hoodie, this quiet wool layer over top of that. And people looked at me and they're like, what are you doing? I said, well, I want the vest close to my body. I want that moisture to move through, but I don't want the, little bit of noise that any laminate layer gives you.
Right.
So I put the Apex hoodie over top. Again, that's camouflage, but it's nice and soft and quiet now. I can go do what I need to do. I've still got that windproof layer. It improves the breathability and everybody wins.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a different way of looking at it. Again, that's where the experience comes in. I think people need to, the rewarming drill and all these things that I've, done in the last year. Really what it comes down to is I really want people to think about what they're doing. Ask questions, ask whoever, and then go out and try it and just see. And at the end of the day, what you end up with is you end up with 6 individuals going on the same hunt, wearing 6 different modified systems, but they all work specifically for how that person hunts and, all the other little variables that are involved.
Until you try to pull a stock on a whitetail in your Fanatic vest, and it's, 75 degrees?
It was like an oven. It was like being in an oven. Yeah. That's one thing I wanted to talk about was on the whitetail gear. Chris, dude, everything about that. So when I put the whitetail gear on, I kind of geek out because, seriously, everything, I don't even realize how nice it is, how thought out the gear is until I'm there and I realize some new pocket or design or something that's on it that it's all centered around like quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Quiet, and the thing that I learned from never whitetail hunting was like even, for example, so if you imagine, like, my guess is, I don't know if this goes through your guys' brains or not, most guys are right-handed, right? So the bow's going to be over here. Mm-hmm. I noticed, like, the grunt tube pocket can be pulled over here by your right hand. It's actually, like, slanted that way. And then the way the zippers go, too, it's like everything can be used by your right hand, which is the free hand, so that you always have your bow. I don't know if you guys know that or you did that, but that was like an observation that I made that I thought was awesome.
Yeah, everything. I mean, every piece of gear. I mean, we have our bows in the office, but we'll put samples on and we'll use them in the field, obviously, too, as well. But even when you just get your first proto in, one of the first steps you get is you go get whatever you're going to be wearing for your system, and then you pull back and make sure nothing's getting in the way, and you'll look in the mirror and you'll ask people in the office, and then you go and you'll shoot or you go outside. I mean, there's a lot of times, like just the other week, I had some samples of some new stuff we're working on. They're looking at me and like I'm on top of a chimney, like pulling back my bow and like shooting. And they're like, what the hell are you doing? And it's like, well, I just want to make sure that the clearance is here. And that's really important. So when you're taking a look at how things are going to interact with your other equipment too, as well, that's really important. Because the last thing you want is somebody going out there. You almost want to not be thinking about what you're wearing when it comes. It just wants to be part of what you have in your toolbox, so to speak. But you don't want, if you're thinking about it in a lot of different ways, it's usually probably because something's a problem. Mm-hmm. All you want to think, okay, I'm cold or I'm hot. I'm going to shed this layer or I'm going to add this layer. And that's what you want to be thinking about with your system. You don't want to be thinking about your system, well, it made noise for me, or I pulled back and it got in the way.
I mean, it's an interesting thing because, whitetail hunters spend a lot of time sitting in a tree stand opposed to spot and stock. And so the gear is really built for, some of these deer are literally 6 feet from me, like that tree I was in on the field. I mean, they were like, I could jump on them. Mm-hmm. Well, they probably moved before I got there because they're freaking fast.
Yeah.
But my point is they're right there, and it's like they just sense and feel your presence, And so you just can't have anything that makes a peep at all. And that gear, I mean, just the way it's built, where it's all puffy and everything. At the same time, so it's quiet, but at the same time, it's extremely warm and comfortable. Before I came across, started using the sit kit stuff, I was always freezing my can off in a tree stand. And then I was always wearing something that made a little too much noise, And then I felt like I was a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, like everything's puffy, like Ralphie on, Christmas Story. It's just hard to move, draw your bow. It's bulky. And, with this stuff, it's not like that. And then we did some spot and stock mule deer hunting wearing that stuff. And I like that it's so quiet, but it picked up every burr, because it's like I don't know what the outer material is on that Fanatic.
Yeah, the more brushed a face is, the good thing is like burrs have evolved to grab fuzzy things as they walk by, and animals, and
we're talking like plant burrs and
those, and so that's millions of years of evolution,
Right.
You're not going to beat that, so you have to think about when you have a system that's got a high loft face on it, on your outer shell, maybe, when you're thinking about that, that's not where you want to go busting through a brush pile. Mm-hmm. You might want to bring that in and pack it in and put it on, because you've got the advantage of that high loft face from a warmth and a quiet standpoint. But it's not something that
disadvantage when you're walking through.
There's
sandburrs.
There's sandburrs. They even find their ways into all our rooms. If you're walking around in socks, you're screwed.
How many burrs do you think you got? Did you get them from when we kind of were running, tried to get on that field last night? Or
well, when that one day when I went deliberately and stalked, I wore my my Timberline pants, and they were fine.
Okay.
Like, they don't really
Do
stick
you have
to
any
this.
of those Equinox pants?
Nope. Not.
You guys, that's what I was wearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or,
I run the Fanatic light bibs down here intentionally because
the bibs.
The burrs grab less.
I didn't have any, they grabbed a little bit, but nowhere near the problems that you were having. So there is options for that in the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. A lot of people say the same thing as the Fanatic light. If it does pick up a burr, it's very simple to pull it off.
Yeah.
So most of that whitetail stuff has the wind stopper in it.
A lot of it is because we saw it today. It was probably gusting to 30 and sustained winds of 17 to 20, and
temperature dropped.
And you can really tell, I did this intentionally while I was here, but I put a lot of just insulation layers on, and I was still getting cold, and then just adding the Stratus, for example, on there. It's amazing what that does at just stopping the wind from cutting through, and especially like an area like we're in now where there's not a whole lot of trees to stop it. So, there's a lot of times when you're just sitting there and the wind picks up, especially, in the couple hours before it gets dark. And then it seems like when the sun sets, the wind kind of sets down.
It's crazy how much heat loss you get with wind if you don't have something to block it. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Well, that's where I think people, they say, how can you stay as warm as you do with so few layers wearing Sitka gear? And it's not the number of layers, but it's the right layers. Mm-hmm. And again, going back to the discussion we were having, if you understand the mechanisms of heat loss I'll just say a tree stand hunter, be what species you're pursuing, but whitetail for sure, that wind stopper is just critical. When it's just even a little breezy, you can't move to generate heat while you're on that tree stand. So you have to trap as much as you can and prevent the wind from stripping as much away as you can.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people that if I'm moving, I generate a lot of heat. Mm-hmm. We'll be hiking, Aaron and I, and if I move, my temp goes way up. If I stand still, it drops way down. So that's where I employ layers a lot. So I'll be in a, all the way down to my base layer climbing up the hill. And I told you this, John, like I hate wearing, I never wear long johns. It has to be stupid cold before I'll put on long johns, because once I get hot, I can't take them off easily.
Right.
I can't layer very easily. It's like you put them on and then they're off, and then it's like you're not going to do that. So I end up getting either super sweaty and uncomfortable, or I end up, and then you're wet, from your own sweat, and cold when you stop, and your temperature drops again. So I don't like to wear long johns. I prefer to just kind of pick my pants for the day, which this year I mostly wore the Ascent pants, even when it was really cold, because I actually prefer to be pretty cool from the waist down. But I do wear knee-high socks that are wool and warm, and I have the Gore socks actually, and I'll wear those up to the knee. So it's like kind of like wearing a long john, under there. It's very warm, and then and then I've got just the regular old pants there, and so I'm cool from the waist to the knees basically. And then if I get hot, I can just slide my sock down, and I start to cool off. The other thing that I do is I wear gloves and a hat. Those, as soon as I start getting hot, the hat comes off, the gloves come off, the sleeves get pulled up, and the socks get pushed down. And I'm working these layers as I start to get hot. I really, with the temperatures being what they are on a Western hunt, I really don't need, I don't need to worry too much about, I can keep from sweating. Is what I'm getting at if I just run my layers right for the most part.
Yeah.
And then, and one of the things I notice with new hunters or guys that haven't done this very much is they don't actually employ their layers. Like they put their stuff on and they start hiking, but they don't take the time to just shed the layer before they keep going. And Aaron and me much more than Aaron, because Aaron seems to be able to not overheat when he exerts energy the way that I do. And so as we're climbing a hill, I find that I'm much better off when I just, after about 5 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, those intervals, I start taking those layers off. But those are some quick ones I can do without stopping. Hat, gloves, socks, down, and that way. And then if I get cold, I can kind of throw those on as I keep moving.
Yeah.
Now, if it's really big, then I got to stop and actually take my pack off, take that jacket off, and put it in the bag.
But it's far easier to change your upper body insulation, and I think far more critical. I mean, all our internal organs are from the waist up, right? I mean, the ones that, kind of keep us moving. Heart, lungs, kidneys, all that kind of stuff. I like to say you commit to your lower body insulation the minute you leave the tent, the cabin, the et cetera. And I know people say, well, there's base layers that I can just take off right away and put on. And although that sounds good in theory, I don't know if I've ever been on a big game hunt where I'm out in the mountains and I say, hey, now's a really good convenient time to drop my pants down to my ankles to pull off base layers, right? Or
I hate it,
certainly
dude.
To sit there and take my boots off and change, and then you're not going to put them back on. And the thing is, it's not as critical on your lower body because the internal organs aren't down there, right? I mean, barring the groinal region,
right?
But for the most part, when you're in
balls of steel,
correct.
You
but
don't
when you're
really
in the mountains,
need...
those legs are moving, they're generating heat. They're not as temperature sensitive, and not as critical, and they're far easier to change upper bodies and lower.
Yeah.
So we talked about if I'm in POW hunting black bear with you, and we're getting out of the tent or leaving the cabin, and we know it's going to rain all day, I may choose sometimes to not even wear soft shell pants like Ascent pants. I may just go right to base layer bottoms and rain gear.
I did that a lot,
right?
Actually,
and it's going to move moisture really well, and they're super easy to dry when you come back at night. And So you kind of commit to that.
And when it stops raining, you can unzip the
Absolutely,
side zips a little bit,
breeze,
vent it.
It'll dry super quick. And
Yep.
Yeah.
I also found that, back to the Ascent pants, we talked about this a little bit. I actually don't mind letting my pants get wet. Like, some guys have this horrible fear of, it's like they got to have the gaiters on and they got to have like rain pants on top, and because they're going to walk through some brush. And I'm like, I get wet. I get wet because it dries fast.
Pretty doggone quick.
Especially, you kind of know what the day is going to bring.
Right.
So if I'm wet from the morning, I just get wet and then I let it dry, and it dries quick. The other times when I know the temperature is going to be very low and it could be a real problem, then I'm actually going to put a rain pant on.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I try to avoid at all costs is getting wet socks, wet feet, because although I can dry my socks at night, rarely are you going to be able to dry boots even in a cabin.
Right.
At night.
Right.
And so that really sets you up for some issues. But, if you have gaiters on, that pretty much negates that problem. Quite a few of our pants have a DWR, durable water repellent, which, sheds light rain, light snow. I mean, if you go hiking through 2,000 feet of ferns, you might as well just get hosed down, right? I mean, we talked about that. And maybe you choose to wear rain pants even on a day it's not raining, just to get up above the brush line, and then go ahead and take them off and go from there. But I'm kind of with you. I don't like to put the rain pants on unless I absolutely have to.
I think in some ways it's like, those people in Scotland kind of had something figured out, just
with haggis,
a kilt, and some long socks. I mean, they let it breathe. They let it breathe.
The boys need air.
Yeah. I subscribe to that. And then I'd rather have my upper body be, like I said, more insulated to compensate if I'm cold from the waist down. Seems to work. And then if I need to, I shed those layers. Wet pants, I agree with you. Like, if my socks start to get wet, too wet, they'll wick moisture, down
right
into the boot. So that can be a problem. But in general, man, it takes a pretty heavy downpour for it to hit my sock and get into my boot. I mean, this year I don't know, I hunted all kinds of conditions and they got wet, but it didn't get in my.
Yeah, the mountain pant, the Timberline pant have a really robust DWR. They do really well, actually. Yeah. The Ascent pant doesn't, but the Ascent pant is so light, it dries so quick that we really didn't feel it needed that chemical treatment.
And tell me about the mountain pant. Aaron wore the mountain pant and he really liked it. He wore it a lot. I kind of either went Timberline or Ascent. Like either go big or, stay light.
It's all personal preference. And, certainly we're lucky that we get to, try them all, and pick and choose. I would say that in my opinion, the mountain pant is the most versatile pant. I can wear it in warm weather. I can wear it in cold weather, right?
Yeah.
I can put a base layer on underneath. A lot of people this year are telling me that they've now taken the Ascent pant and done that, like yourself.
Yep.
The Timberline pant for me has always been more of a mid to late season pant, just with the waterproof panels and in the seat and the knees. But, I know a lot of guys that hunt elk in that. But again, for me in my style of hunting, that would be a little bit too warm. But so that's why I go back to, the mountain pant it's not the perfect pant, but it's a really just rock solid, versatile pant. Anybody who's new to Sitka, if they say, hey, what pants should I buy? I don't even hesitate. I'm like, buy a mountain pant. It'll be a great introduction to Sitka, and then you can decide to go, lighter or heavier from there. But again, it's personal preference.
So we got an email, just the other day. He was asking about a pant for the Kootenays. Right? And you remember that question?
Yeah. So, again, I mean, we all want a pant that's waterproof, crazy breathable, like, say a mountain pant, but has the, water protection of a dew point rain or a rain pant.
Right.
We all want that.
Of course we do.
And it doesn't exist. We can't do it yet. But I would say, if you're going to go again and hike through, like we were talking, wet ferns, dewy grass in the morning, like you probably should have a rain pant on in the morning and kind of deal with that hike in the morning. But again, the mountain pant and the Timberline pant have a very robust DWR. I would side with the mountain pant just because it's a little thinner. Mm-hmm. So when it does get wet, if you choose to not put the rain pants on, it's going to dry a lot quicker when you get to the top of that ridge and the sun comes up and, you continue to hunt whatever,
so
mountain goat or elk or whatever he's going after.
So Matthew Peshke, I can't say it. He said, so I'm reaching out to you about the Sitka gear. We're in the mountains with a lot of thigh-high brush and spots. Mm-hmm. He's a day hunter, likely have somewhere warm as a home base. Mm-hmm. Okay. What I need, not want, is a pant that will not saturate within minutes of touching thigh-high brush. Mm-hmm. I have Piranha Zions, which I love, but they get saturated very quickly. I've heard Timberlines spoken highly of, but its ability to not saturate is in question. For me, other than the knees and butt. I'm hoping to get your opinion on pants that can be worn all day while hiking up mountains in a light rain or in wet underbrush that will withstand saturation for at least a few hours. Not looking for rain pants, just a highly water resistant pant that I can.
Yeah, so he's looking for the same thing I'm looking for. and when I find it, I'll let him know. And really nobody has that. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be in the Kootenays, you need to at least be carrying some kind of rain gear.
Yeah.
Again, if you're gonna bust up through a bunch of wet brush and ferns, you may choose to wear rain pants at a certain point. Mm-hmm. But I would say out of our offerings, I would recommend the mountain pants. They're really tight knit. They got a great DWR. If or when over a certain point in time, any soft shell pant's gonna get wet. But again, as your body is that engine, it's going to continue to push the moisture out, and so you'll find that when you do stop, and the sun comes out, that those pants are going to dry pretty quick. But they're not a replacement for rain pants. I mean, nothing is a replacement for rain pants but rain pants. Yeah, but so what Matt's looking for is he's looking for a soft shell pant with a durable water repellent coating. Mm-hmm. That's what he needs to be looking for, no matter the brand. Again, like I said, the mountain pant I think is an excellent choice. Next in line I think would be Timberline. I believe they're a little thicker, so you tend to sweat a little more, even mm-hmm. though the seat and knees are waterproof. That's why I kind of go back to that most versatile pant, which in my opinion is maybe Aaron's is a mountain pant.
Yep.
But if it's going to rain, if you're out for the day, you can kind of sort of get away with anything.
Yeah.
But I still think people should carry rain pants if you're in that kind of environment.
And we talked about that. Like if you're going up the mountain, just man up and put the rain pants on.
Put the rain pants on to get up through it.
And
once you get in the alpine.
Yep. And then when you clear the tree line, you're up above.
Yeah.
Then you can take them off.
Right.
But one of the things we talked about was being responsible. Right?
You have to be at the end of the day, right? Like everybody's got to be responsible to go into the backcountry and kind of take care of themselves. And, and this is just as a lesson that I learned a long time ago is, gaiters are invaluable. A lot of people don't like to wear them, to include myself, but they're really invaluable. But, if you're going to put rain pants on and you have gaiters, put the gaiters on. That way you can keep the gaiters on even when you take the rain pants off. And then you pull the rain pants on over top of the gaiters. That way when it rains and the water's flowing downhill, if you have the gaiters on the outside, it's still going to go between the rain pant and the gaiter, get in your boot and wet your boots out. So you have the gaiters on, you pull the rain pants on, you get up through the brush, you're ready to take them off, you strip them off, still have your gaiters on to continue on with the rest of the hunt. And then you can maybe do the same thing coming back down the mountain, right? So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
When we talked about being responsible, it was, nobody wants to have to put the rain gear on and start going waist deep through the brush. And because you have the rain gear on, you're like, crap, I'm going to get all sweaty. Well, that's where it's like, just slow down. We talked about that. It's just going to take us a little longer to get there.
Right.
So we're not just a ball of sweat when we get to the top.
Nobody ever kind of talks about the hunter's responsibility in this equation, right? And that, if I put more layers on because of the environmental conditions, it's up to me or the group of people I'm with to slow the group down, and I like to say regulate the pace, right? So as not to sweat, because not only are you going to sweat and wet out your clothes, you're going to start to dehydrate yourself, right? And this could start this vicious spiral if you're in the backcountry of being dehydrated and never be able to catch up.
Especially if you're flirting
set yourself up for altitude sickness. I mean, a lot of different things,
and
right?
You're flirting, especially when you're flirting with like 29, 32 degrees.
Now you're going to start flirting with hypothermia. So, you have to be an active participant in this. It's, nobody's product is this, wonder
magic
thing that you can put on, like this suit of armor, this Superman cape that you can just go, and be invincible in. There is a responsibility. There is a learning curve. And hopefully, like podcasts like this, we can help people like lessen the angle of that learning curve.
Yeah.
But you've got to go, these are what, off seasons for shed hunting and scouting, all these things where, I like to say you can go out and try these things and experiment with less consequence and not have that, great tag in your pocket, right? Or that golden ticket, for that sheep hunt or elk hunt. And you're like, oh man, the stuff I have doesn't work because I don't understand how it goes together. Like that's where the off season really comes into play.
Right. So, we talked about this too. Sometimes it'll it's going to rain all day. This happened to me once on a Prince of Wales Island Sitka blacktail hunt where it was coming down cats and dogs, and I kind of wanted to hunt that day, but I knew we had backpacked in for like 6 days, and this was day 2. And I decided, as much as it killed me to do it, was just to stay in the tent all day, which isn't really my style, right? But the temperatures were pretty low, and I was worried about getting all my backpack stuff wet and having nowhere to dry it out.
Right.
And then being stuck above timberline in this wet environment, soaking wet. So I gave up a day of hunting to stay dry.
Yeah, and those aren't easy things to do. And I mean, let's not kid ourselves. They were probably much harder to do when we were younger. But, I was in the Brooks Range on a solo dull sheep hunt by myself, right? Middle of nowhere. I got a satellite phone, but other than that, I'm like on my own and didn't have the best weather. And I kept spotting, these couple ramps through the clouds, and I decided, okay, the next morning I'm going to go after them, and it was kind of the weather you described. And, again, you have to take some personal responsibility and be realistic, I guess. And it's like, not that I couldn't have gone after them, and maybe I could have got it done, maybe not, but you're trying to like play your odds. And I figured, okay, if I go up there, I get in that weather, I'm going to get wet from sweat. Everything's going to get soaked. And if I don't get the ram, it's probably going to take me, because I knew the next day, or because it doesn't really get dark up there, in like 12 or 15 hours, the weather was going to improve. I would have probably spent the next day of good weather drying my stuff out, licking my wounds. And so I chose to kind of, bunker up, hydrate, kind of get ready for that weather window, and then go, after them when the weather was better. So it's not that the gear didn't perform or I couldn't figure it out, but you kind of have to pick and choose when you want to go out there. So I think it's sound advice, but it's easier said than done a lot of times, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, when you give up that day, the next day, the next couple of days were so good. And if I had gotten everything wet, I think like you said, I'd be wasting time trying to dry things out.
Yeah.
Snyder and I had an interesting experience that we talked on a previous podcast this year while we were hunting elk. We were at about 13,000 feet, 12,800, something like that. We were hunting elk, and a storm blew in. And we were hustling back to the tents there, and the storm was coming. And it's funny because it got cold, and the wind was just whipping hard. And it was, you see the clouds, the storm bank running in. In Colorado, you can just see the blackness coming your way, especially when you're at 13.8. And so we see this thing coming at us, and Aaron and I start just hustling back and it's dark. The sun is going down, so we can see the tents now, but and we're heading back, and Aaron's like, "Do you think we can make it?" And I was looking at it, looking at the clouds, looking at the tents, and I'm like, "I don't know, man." And we start going, and we go maybe 50 yards, and I stop and pulled out my rain jacket. I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it. So I had rain pants, but I didn't pull them out. I was like, well, at least I'm just going to throw the jacket on. And I threw that flash rain jacket on, which I was telling you about. Yeah. And we should talk about it here in a minute, because it's just a tiny, tiny lightweight rain jacket that I don't even know, hardly know I'm carrying yet. It's been, when I need it, it's phenomenal. So I pull this jacket out, throw it on really quick. Aaron just keeps going ahead. Like his goal is to get to that tent before the rain does. So I'm like, I'm already looking at it going, it ain't happening. But I underestimated how intense the rain was going to be. Mm-hmm. So I take off, and the sun goes down. It's dark. The clouds are there. And so we're just heading up to our elevation point, and then we just cut across because we know what elevation our tent's at. So we're just climbing and cutting diagonal over to our tent. We hit the elevation, and the rain is just comes down. Well, Aaron is totally exposed, right? But he keeps going. Well, within like 2-3 minutes, I mean, he is wet to the bone. Mm-hmm. I'm dry basically from the waist up, but the wind is hitting so hard that I'm not dealing with the rain just kind of falling straight down and dripping off I'm drenched from the front. It's like someone hit me with a fire hose. Yep. And now I'm hustling, and the wind is the rain is pelting you in the face so bad it feels like you're getting stung, And we're both like, I lose track. I can't see Aaron. Trying to see what elevation. I got to pull my GPS out. He's checking his. Anyway, we overshoot it a little bit. Come back. We're kind of hunting in the dark, but we find it, and then we get in the tents. But I am soaked from the waist down. Had I just taken 1 extra minute to put the rain pants on at the same time, I'd have been bone dry, getting back to the tent. And Aaron was wet from head to toe.
Yeah. So
we climbed in our sacks. Well, we have just soaking wet gear now, and it's cold. But we're able to, I'm able to shed what I've got, and Aaron too, and put on something a little bit dry, and we go to bed, just tuck in, and there's like 70-mile-an-hour winds, and I thought my Heidelberg was going to get ripped off the mountain, but it stayed. And next morning we get up, and it's ice, and like everything's covered in ice, and it's cold. We try to hunt elk, but we don't get like 100 yards into the timber, and about an hour and a half into the hike, and Aaron's got a lot of wet clothes on.
Yep.
And he's freezing. So we pull over. We just kind of have to stop, and we start this giant bonfire. But he had gotten, he struggles with his hands and feet just get icy cold because he has pretty poor circulation. And so we had to stop and light a fire, and it set us back, a few hours. Yeah. And the morning hunt was kind of done because we just had to be warm.
All right. That's obviously an extreme hunt, extreme situation. And, I did that rewarming drill where, I got in the icy, slushy river, excuse me, to prove a point. But, that's a real world example where, you guys are wet, you're really exposed, you're up at high elevation. That easily could have become a life and death situation for the both of you, right? Mm-hmm. If not that night, then the next day when temperatures dropped and things iced over, and that's where I feel it is so critical that people understand whatever gear they have, how it works, how it integrates. So, I'll just speak for myself. I know that I could jump in the sleeping bag that I've chosen, and by the next morning, I guarantee, because I've done it so many times, my clothing would have been dry. Because if you take the clothes off, although you get this instant gratification of a warm base layer,
yep,
you have the problem. You still have this lingering problem at 13,000 feet in the backcountry of the cold clothes in the corner. That
trust me, because
I know that tomorrow morning are going to be a block of ice.
Yeah, because I kept them on for about an hour, and I was like,
right.
I'm having trouble sleeping. I knew eventually I would, but I was like, screw this. I just want to get comfortable and go to sleep.
Right.
So I took my pants off and pulled them out of the sleeping bag, and they were a block of ice in the morning.
Well, so that's the problem. It delays the suck fest.
Yeah.
That is eventually got to ensue. Now, the only other alternative is you bring a complete second set of everything, which is not very practical for the kind of hunting that you're describing, right? So you have to make do with what you've got. We use the term doesn't have to be fun to be fun. Everybody thinks, oh, well, geez, that doesn't seem real comfortable to get in your sleeping bag when it's wet. It's like, no, it's not. But it's life-saving. But I know that in 3 hours, I'm going to be fine. Okay, maybe I got to turn over, lay on my front to dry out my ass, in the sleeping bag. I mean, there's some realistic things that have to go on here. But I don't have this pile of wet and, in your case, frozen clothes, which happens so often in those kind of weather events. Right? And then now the next day, you are setting yourself up for potentially hypothermia or at a minimum, right, lost time on your hunt. And, so, I don't want to speak for you, but, I'm sure you and Aaron have gone through that, talked through that, and got a better system. But, you guys are really experienced. You put some lesser experienced people in there, that could be a casualty, right? That could be,
oh, for sure.
Forget the hunt at that point. People are fighting for their lives.
Well, for sure. Like when we were up there kind of wandering around in the darkness with the wind like hitting us, and I'm looking at the elevation, and I know we overshot it now. Now it was a little bit, it was like, okay, keep calm. I've got a rain jacket. I'm dry from the waist up.
Right.
I'm not too cold right now, and it sucks, but we'll find this thing. But I could see somebody getting completely lost, and if they didn't have a GPS, in that situation, or they weren't good with, they didn't have some tool to help them figure out what elevation they're on. I mean, they're wandering around in that.
But what happens now? Let's run that scenario out. You don't find the tent, and you've got a buddy who's completely wet, who will eventually put rain gear on, and you're wet from the waist down.
Yep.
It's blowing 70 and raining. Okay, you're going to seek shelter, maybe under a rock, probably no trees at 13,000 feet, but let's say you find shelter. What are you going to do? You're probably not going to start a fire. So you're going to sit there and really be in a survival situation.
Yeah.
I'm there in my mind on some other things where I'm like, oh my God, if I didn't find my tent in some whiteout blizzards, like literally tripping over the guy lines of the tent that had been covered over in snow, I'm like, what would I have done? And I've played those scenarios out in my mind. And so when I'll call it build a backcountry system, which, I know you guys do as well. Like I use those experiences to kind of build that system. And what is the one thing? I might not always have my backpack. I might not always have my tent, but I'm going to have the clothes on my back. And so that's the one thing that I'm always so critical to make sure that, I'm picking the right thing for the right scenario. And you still don't always get it right. But,
Right.
I can rely on what I've got.
We in our plan in that situation.
Forgive me, I'm going to,
No.
because it's 11, so it's time to drink Oban again.
Drink up because we might get some really entertaining stuff out of that, right, Sloane?
Oh yeah.
The hard
Fired
tacos
up.
were awesome, by the way. They
Thank
rocked.
you. So, in that situation for me, because Timberline isn't too far away, right?
Yep.
Even if it's 45 minutes or an hour.
Yeah.
As long as one thing I know for sure, as long as I'm moving, I stay pretty warm.
Absolutely, yep.
So I would definitely just inch my way down into the trees where I then have some cover and there's wood to burn.
Yep.
And I would start a bonfire as big as this living room. And then I would stand by, which I did 2 other times on that trip before this. But this time we were so far up and we did find the tents. But the biggest mistake in that moment for me was not taking the 1 minute, 2 minutes to put on the rain gear.
Oh, it's so.
And we knew it was coming. This whole let's race to the tent and see if we can make it.
I know.
Well, it was kind of fun until you got soaked in 2 seconds.
I'm as guilty. I'm as guilty as anybody. Me and 2 buddies were hiking. We did this thing where we got dropped off on the south end of Kodiak Island, and our objective was to hike the highest feasible route. So there's a spine of mountains that run south to north or north to south. We were going south to north, back to Kodiak, and we wanted to hike the highest feasible route back to Kodiak. So we're doing this, and we're putting on a lot of miles, and we're about 20, maybe a little less than 20 miles on the last day from getting back. My feet are doing good. Everything's fine. I got my gaiters on, my soft shell pants, and it starts to rain. And I'm right where you are. I'm right where Aaron was. I'm like, you know what? F it. Like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to gut it out. And then it just gets worse. Well, by the time it got worse, and I do put my rain pants on and my rain jacket, my pants are wet. My socks got wet, sucked that into my boots. And after covering, don't quote me, let's just say 110, 120 kilometers, my feet were a little beat up. By the time I got back to the trailhead on the last 18 miles, my feet looked like hamburger. And I was so mad. That's when I coined the phrase hike angry. Because the angrier you hike and you just channel your inner rage, the warmer you get. But and the reason I was mad is because I did it to myself.
Right.
I did it to myself from laziness. And that's really what, ends up tearing me up sometimes is, it's sometimes the little things that just.
It's a lesson I've learned, I won't.
And you're going to have to learn it again.
Yeah.
Just like me.
And it can change so fast. One thing that I do carry because, weather can be so brutal. I always have multiple ways to start a fire on my person all the time in multiple areas. Like I'm crazy about the ability to light a fire. So we got trioxane tablets. I've got other fire starter types in there. I've got multiple lighters. I've got fireproof matches. I've got a little bit of everything. I could burn things down.
Yep.
And that's what I found. And I practiced starting fires in all sorts of situations.
Well, I wanted to make a comment about that because you had said that and it may shock you guys, but I'm not very socially active. But I do see some of the I do see the questions that come back on at least some of the Sitka gear questions, and people bring them to me. But one of the first things I get is, well, why would you ever do that? All you got to do is start a fire,
right?
And from a person who taught survival at a very high level for a lot of years, I've seen the reality of people that thinking they're prepared to build a fire, but they've only done it in their backyard on a dry day. Right. They've only done it with tinder that's been pre-split, with a hatchet or whatever the case may be.
Try to start a fire on Prince of Wales Island above timberline. Or
correct. And this certainly isn't directed at you, but my concern and problem with that is the vast majority, it's very flippant to say, well, I just start a fire.
Right.
And I would say build a fire in 6 inches of slush when you have about 5 minutes of dexterity in your fingers. And after that, you're effed.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you going to do then? And so you have gross motor function. Like if you can tell me you've done that and prepped and have 3 or 4 or 5 different ways to start a fire and you've done it in those conditions, but that's not a very good, reliable thing to save your life.
Right.
That's secondary, probably tertiary to the couple other things that I would do leading up to that point. Right. But very few people, and I'm not trying to be demeaning to anybody, but I would just ask everybody to be honest with themselves and say, have I practiced in the worst possible conditions? Do I have multiple ways? Because, I mean, thick lighters, windproof lighters, those things go. Then once it's cold, you can't actually do it. All you can do is gross motor functions.
And Aaron's
you get
been
to
there
wet wood
at times where
he's got that issue,
his hands aren't working.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You can't wipe your nose. You can't zip your jacket up at that point. And so you have a set amount of time where you have to go through this course of action.
Walk us through that. Like let's one scenario that comes to mind is you fall in the water, right? It's below freezing outside or close to it, right? You fall in the water. Let's say your matches are toast
the first thing you do is you don't start a fire. So you want to immediately try to improve your situation. So if I fall in a river or a lake, the first thing you want to do is trap whatever little body heat you have left, right? Body's 98.6. That dip is not going to drop your core temperature too terribly low to start with. You want to try to capture as much of that heat as possible. So, if you have puffy insulation, that's when you want to put it on. And that's when really the choice of your puffy insulation is going to make it or break it. Is it synthetic? Is it down? Is it, a treated down, whatever? You want to put a watch cap on, which is the hedge of your chimney. You want to cap that heat. That's the first thing you want to do. So I want to capture that heat. And the next thing you want to do,
even if it's your clothes, even if your stuff's wet.
No, you can't. There's no time to take things off. What are you going to do? Stand there naked? You're not going to have a second set of clothes. And if it's cold out, again, the clock starts to tick as soon as you get cold. And when you get out, if it's really cold, your hands are going to go really quick. And like I said, you're not going to be able to zip your zipper up. Right. You're going to start to mumble. Like there are very few things you're going to be able to do that with fine motor skills. So if I can trap that heat, if I can put some clothes on, and the next thing I want to do is I want to start to move. And moving generates body heat. And where am I moving to? I am moving to some place of shelter. I'm moving to a place to set my tent up. I'm moving to a stand of trees. I'm moving, in your case, I'm moving directly downhill to tree line. Something like that, right? Yeah. So I am improving my situation. I'm getting out of the elements. I'm getting out of that, what I'll call danger zone. I'm trying to generate heat and keep that cognitive function. And then at that point, you can start to decide what to do, right? Are you in your tent? Can I start a stove? Are you in your tent? Can I, start to consume hot liquids or fuel? Am I below tree line? Am I out of the wind? Is a convective heat loss gone? Now do I insulate myself from the ground? Now I'm getting rid of conductive heat loss. Okay. Am I kind of stable? Are me and my buddy okay? Like, can we move our fingers and toes? All right. Let's now start to build a fire, assuming you have the materials to do that. If I only had lighters, they're wet, they're done. Did I have something in my pack that I, left up there? You're done. Like, what are you going to do now? So, it's not, if you think you're going to get out of the river, stand on the side of the river and light a fire and warm up, you're
right.
You're going to be a statistic.
Right.
You're going to be a statistic. And so I think we need to realistically play all these things through. If the only place I'm going to hunt is Arizona, I'm probably not going to experience the exact same conditions you and I are talking about. And certainly there's plenty of stuff to kill you in a climate like Arizona.
Yeah.
But maybe
different
hypothermia isn't the first one.
Right. Maybe it's overheating and exhaustion.
Right. There's probably some other
dehydration.
Things. Correct.
Right.
Dehydration, sunstroke, etc.
Yep.
Those kind of things. So, people really need to be honest with themselves, and that's where I just keep preaching. No matter what you choose to use when you go in the field, just make sure that it lives up to your expectations and that you've tried it prior to going to 13,000 feet on an elk hunt, where the margin of error, let's be honest, you hunt elk at 13,000 feet in Colorado, the margin for error starts to become pretty slim.
Yeah.
Not to, I hope your wife doesn't listen to this, but, but when you're experienced, it's absolutely fine. But,
Yeah.
when you're kind of learning it, the learning curve's pretty steep.
It can be, right.
It can
be
be very
deadly.
steep.
And I think too, like, one thing I've learned now is, when I was younger and I hunted like with my dad or my uncles, the gear we used was like flannel shirts
Sure.
and, some old wool and things like that. Today, it's amazing what I've got. That's lightweight, keeps me warm, keeps me dry, breathes, even though I'm active. And so I think that gives people a lot of confidence that they can do more. They wear that and they're like, I feel kind of like you said, like I got a Superman suit on, right? Now I can kind of conquer the world. But the reality is you don't put the rain jacket on, the rain gear on when you should. You get caught in this storm. It can give you a false sense of security, I think.
It absolutely can. And, it's having the right gear is a step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. But it's not the cure all. I in my previous life, I tested a lot of different gear. And when you test gear, it doesn't always perform up to your expectations, and I've spent a lot of miserable nights out in the mountains, shivering, cold, et cetera, whatever, cursing. But I wasn't in a life and death situation because I prepared and I kind of had, I had some safety measures, but knowledge is the biggest thing you can carry with you. I'd love for everybody to buy my product, but if you buy my product and don't have any experience to go with it, you can still find yourself in a dire situation.
Right.
And podcasts like this and all the information that's out there, that's awesome. It's better than it's ever been. At the end of the day, though, you still need to go out and build that fire in the rain, or you still need to go hike at 13,000 feet and see how it really cripples you. Mm-hmm. You need to sit in the tree stand, right? When it's blowing 30 miles an hour and you're in Texas and you're thinking everything's hunky-dory and you're like, I think I'm going to die from hypothermia, which you're not. But you know what you are going to do? You're potentially going to give up an opportunity at a great buck, because when he comes out right at last light and you're shivering so hard you can't even see straight, let alone draw your bow, like, we're out here to have fun. We're out here to enjoy ourselves.
And this bull rider hunted whitetails up north where it's like, what was the temperature?
I'm not even doing that.
That just is like, that is a whitetail addict.
Yeah, it was -7, but it's speaking to just even having the right equipment. And so Jim Holes in Alberta, the range could be -30 to 40 degrees. That's the range that you could be hunting in depending on the week and what weather's
30.
Yeah.
70-degree shift.
But it's interesting. We were talking about the way you're layering, and you wouldn't think like it would be 7 degrees or something going out in the morning, or 4 degrees in the morning. And I would have my lower on. So I would have my base layer to move moisture. I would have my insulating layer, maybe depending on how cold it was, maybe one other layer, and then like my Fanatic bibs on. But on my top, I might just have a base layer and like a Fanatic hoodie. And I'd be walking out into the 7-degree weather, because what I knew I was going to do is about to take a ride over to my stand. I deal with the cold then, but I knew what I had learned from when I first got there and started doing this and having to hang a stand the way that Jim does it, because everything's very quiet. You've got your stand on your right hip, you've got your bow on your left hip. There's no pulling up anything, and you're going up with a with a climbing rope or like a
lineman's
belt, and you're going up and you're hanging in your stand, you wouldn't believe when it's 4 degrees how much sweat can start pouring off of you. And then you sit in your stand, and now you're going to sit for 4.5 and 5 hours, and
You're soaked.
And, there was one day that I let myself get into that situation because I put too much on when I wasn't thinking the right way when I first get there. And usually you kind of have to practice these things, or I'd be trying different systems out to kind of understand so I could recommend to people in all of these different situations what to use. And so, I mean,
well, you and I were talking, right? And you kind of poked fun at me a little bit, and you're like, I think it was you, and you're like, oh, well, do you think you could do
odds are it was.
Odds are it was. You think you could do a rewarming for whitetail hunters? And I said, and I didn't even skip a beat, and I said, well, absolutely, but you wouldn't jump in, a frozen lake. But, you walk to your stand. This scenario plays itself out how many times? I've done it, right? When I hunted in Ohio, the hikes in there and steeper terrain than normal, they were longer. And so I would literally dress for the hike in the morning.
Yep.
And then dress at the base of the tree for the climb up. But my point to the rewarming was, once you get sweated up, when your base layers get sweated up, when you got sweated up in Canada, and then you go ahead and say, put a Fanatic jacket on.
Yep.
And you sit down, because you're not going to be able to do jumping jacks. You have no place to move around on that platform. How quickly and efficiently is your system going to move that moisture away and keep you warm? That is a version of the rewarming drill. Can my system perform on this incredible hunt, right? I mean, people probably, that's a lifetime type of hunt to go to the Edmonton bow zone and kill a big whitetail. And you climb a tree stand wearing too much stuff, and then your system stays wet, and you're getting down out of the stand an hour and a half later, like your hunt's over.
Yeah, and I hear people say this, oh, if I get uncomfortable, I'll just get down. But you might have missed that, it's
that's the whole point.
Well, what are you there
It's not
for?
very gritty to get down.
It's not very gritty to get down.
You're there to
It's
kill.
anti-gritty.
That's right.
Yeah, we won't use the word. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one thing that I've been known to do is hike to the, get hot, right? Like, find myself in that situation. And I'll stand in a stiff wind and drop my drawers and my like everything, and just get that moisture off. Get it off.
Yep.
Get it all aired out, and then put the clothes right back on. And it's cold, but I need the moisture to be gone.
Yep. It's
And
venting.
And so you put that kind of just the right amount of layer on whatever, depending on the weather outside. So you get that airflow, taking that moisture off. You're still keeping some heat in. Some of that heat's drying the skin, and then you're back to business.
I won't, well, it doesn't matter. I was going to say I won't use any names. I don't even know the guy's name, but I'm actually glad for that. But a gentleman that we were in this whitetail camp with, and he rolled in with a brand new Stratus system. And, I mean, it was perfect Stratus weather. That's kind of what I was wearing. I'm like, and this guy was, thinking, like, he's got it. And first day we come back, we're like, hey, how'd it go, this and that? And he says, man, I was out of the field by 9 a.m. We're like, really? Why? He says, I was cold. He says, your stuff doesn't work. And I was like, now, mind you, I'm not the whitetail guy. You are, but I'm the guy in camp. So I'm like, well, please tell me why. He goes, well, I got up there and I just shivered and I just never could get warm. And I said, well, walk me through your system. What do you got on? Well, the gentleman had on cotton T-shirt, cotton underwear. He had a flannel shirt. He had a pair of blue jeans, and he put the Stratus over top. He hiked in. He got wet from sweat, and then expected, this wind stopper system to like be this miracle cure and keep him from shivering. Well, the reality is his base layers in his jeans never dried out, and so he literally just started to shiver himself to death.
Right.
So we, instead of, we're not going to make fun of the guy. He doesn't know. So we sat there and said, no, like, you've taken one step. You need to take a couple more to get to where you need to be. And by the end of the week, he's like, all right, I get it. Like, I understand.
And I think, man, I tend to take that for granted. Right?
We all do.
Like, been there. It's that's an experience I got so long ago now that it doesn't even dawn on me that I need to talk to someone about that. Right?
Right.
But it's true. I can see a guy getting a whole setup of gear and then wearing all the wrong stuff underneath. Also wearing it, to the point, like I said, if for me, if I'm sweating, especially if it's cold outside and I'm sweating, that's a signal. Okay, wait, what do I need to do here? Because that moisture causes all sorts of problems.
Yep.
So with the temperature being the outside temperature being what it is, there's really no excuse for sweating. Generally,
right.
I've got too much on. I need to shed something. That's kind of my signal. And then as I drop layers, I can keep from sweating and exert energy still.
Yep.
And if I have to slow down, I have to slow down.
Yep.
Like you said, regulate.
I mean, you know what it comes down to? Everything we've been talking about, to include my glass that's empty, it's all about moisture management. And so the management of that moisture, right, is so critical to staying on stand, staying in the mountains, right, or staying on the couch,
right,
because I need a little bit more Oban. See how I work that in?
Nice.
But it's all about, it really is about moisture management, and that moisture is either internal from you going out, or it's external in the case of the conversation we just had,
rain or
coming
storm,
in, right? And you really, like, if you, and maybe this is just me over the course of years, maybe it's not so intuitive, but like, you have to, it's always about, how do I manage that? If I'm walking in whitetail stand or if I'm in the mountains, it's different, directions, but it's still that moisture management. Do I regulate my pace? Do I vent on the way to the stand? Do I take the 5 minutes to strip down and just blow all the heat out before I climb into the tree stand, whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
Again, it kind of goes back to the responsibility of the hunter. We'll try to do all we can. I know you are, to educate them, but they have to kind of,
you got to experiment.
You got to meet halfway.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a couple miserable outings, learning a few things, but it gets better pretty quick.
It does.
When you figure it out. Yeah.
In 1907, only 41,000 elk remained in North America, and in 1950, only 12,000 pronghorn remained. Today, there are more than 1 million elk and 1.1 million pronghorn. Why? Because hunting is conservation. In 1937, hunters actually requested an 11% tax on guns, ammo, bows, and arrows to help fund conservation. That tax so far raised more than $8 billion for wildlife conservation. Altogether, hunters pay more than $1.6 billion a year for conservation programs. No one gives more. It's obvious that hunters care about animals, and yet we actively hunt and kill them. Many people cannot understand this dichotomy. How can we both care about animals and also kill them? It's a question that I challenge all of you to consider. We can argue as much as we like, but the fact is, hunting is man's oldest and most successful try at life. Every human being is alive today because our ancestors hunted. So it's a relatively new phenomenon for people to regard hunting as a cruel and frivolous activity that has no worth outside of personal gratification for the hunter. The funny thing is, hunting has increased my appreciation for wild animals and wild places, not decreased it. And as I watch society lose its ties to wildlife and conservation, I feel my bond with nature grow ever stronger in direct correlation to my time spent hunting. I understand now more than ever that hunting is the greatest hope for creating the next generation of true conservationists. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting in the outdoors. Our wild animals and wild places depend on it.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to The Gritty Bowman.
Gritty Bowman.